So we're going to start the next session shortly. Because we started the program late, this session is going to go till about 12:30, 12:35, and then after that we're going to have a Q&A. So brothers, they can raise their hands and ask the question. Sisters, there's notepads, and I believe there's pens downstairs. So if you can write your questions down, someone will come downstairs and get it around 12:30, and then inshallah we'll answer your questions then. So without further ado, Brother Vajra, you start the program.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Jazakumullah khair. We're going to go to the next, I'm going to go to the next chapter, shall we say. It's called Morality and Spirituality in the Age of Technology. And this is going to be about sort of social media and etc., Facebook, Twitter, blogs, iPhones, and all of that. And I'm trying to move, I wanted to start with sort of conceptual, theoretical stuff, and now we're really going to get into more into the nuts and bolts, as we say, practical things. And inshallah, by the evening session, when we go to the next session for Q&A, you know, that we can really start unpacking a lot of this. I failed to mention this in the beginning, but I want to bring your attention to, at the very end, I have a list of recommended readings. Now, there's a lot of material on this. I've tried to bring to your attention the best material that you can read on this. Alhamdulillah, there's two brothers, Habib and Saad Qadri. May Allah, you know, reward them for all their work. They're two amazing brothers in Chicago, and this is their book. I'll put it right here in front so the audience can see it. And they've written 3 books on parenting and these issues. I've read it. It's amazing work, mashallah. I appreciate it immensely. I mean, I can't say enough amazing things about it. I encourage both young people and parents to read it, because the way they write, and that's what inspired me to structure my presentation, they have some chapters that are for parents, and they have some sections that are for children. The 3 books are, and I'll show you them now, I brought them with me, and the references are at the end as well. This book is called The War Within Our Hearts, and it's a book that deals with all of the major issues that our young people are going with. So I'll just read through, you know, issues of dating, issues of drinking and drugs, issues of internet, issues of suicide and depression and abuse, issues of parent, parent-child problems, issues of choosing friends over parents, etc., etc. And I mean, this is just, I'm just giving you a brief overview. There's many more issues, and they have a chapter on each one of these. And the bottom line is, it's very practical. The way they talk, the way they write about it is from an Islamic perspective. This is reality of what young people are dealing with, and this is how, from Quran and Hadith perspective, we would look at this, and they give you practical advice at the end of each of those. So this is one book, The War Within Our Hearts, and Imam Zaid Shakir wrote the introduction to this. The second book is called Parenting, Who Said It Was Easy? And this book is specifically for parents, and this is like, you know, when you're about to get married, the conversations you have with your spouse about what kind of parent do you want to be, what kind of family do you want to have. Then when you do get married, when your children are young, when they're toddlers, when they're, you know, at every stage of their life, up until all the way to the end of, you know, when your children are teenagers, to getting married, to the point is even if you have a child die. I mean, this is a very comprehensive book, and I highly, highly recommend it, mashallah. Like, I'm going to honestly say, there's a lot of literature, even like non-Muslim social psych literature, family, couples counseling literature, and it's good and it's effective, but the beauty of this is that they've summarized all of that and sort of looked at it through an Islamic lens, right? And then giving you Islamic prescriptions and overview on that. And then the last book is called Wisdom from the Wise, and it's called Advice of Luqman alayhi salam. And this is the beauty of Surah Luqman in the Quran, the nasiha that Luqman alayhi salam gives to his son, which, you know, they basically summarize that and have written on it. And this is like sort of, this specifically is written for fathers, because the advice that Luqman alayhi salam gives is in some ways general, but also as a father to a son. and there's like gems and gems of wisdom in here that I recommend. All three of these books you can buy online. They're invaluable. I mean, I can't say enough amazing things about them. Two other books right now that I'll mention is that Sister Ustaza Yasmin Mujahid wrote this book called Reclaim Your Heart, which is an amazing book. It's called Personal Insights into Breaking Free from Life's Shackles. This is written, and because I try to teach things, I try to present for both young people and for parents. This is written for everybody can benefit from it, but this is especially for like young adults, high school students, college students, people in their 20s, when you're dealing with a lot of the emotional turbulence and, just what goes on at that phase of your life, about, disappointment, from your relationships, et cetera, et cetera. This is a really wonderful book that breaks it down. And she has a blog as well. It's just, I think, just Google her name, yasminmujahid.com, and her blog it's really, really insightful stuff. And then this one I really like, which I think is also very beneficial. It's called 7 Steps to Moral Intelligence. And it's a summary of Imam Ghazali's teachings. And Imam Ghazali rahmatullahi was like a mountain of wisdom and insight into spiritual psychology in our tradition. Perhaps one of the greatest ever in our tradition of we say of ilm al-ihsan, of looking into the way the human mind, the human heart, the human psychology works. And this is like a beautiful summary of that called Moral Intelligence. And it's written in a very easy to read style. And I bought this book last year at ISNA, and it's just, it's fantastic. This is the kind of book young people should read, adults can read. You can do like a halaqah in your house with your family with this kind of book. So I brought copies of each of them to show you, and they're all mentioned at the end as well. Now, morality and spirituality in the age of technology. Now, the first thing is I want us to understand is that, I'm going to talk about social media as a tool. It's a tool, right? I'm not saying it's inherently bad. I'm not saying it's inherently good. I'm saying it's neutral. And the nature of a tool is a tool can be used constructively or a tool can be used destructively. If I have a hammer, I can build an amazing building with a hammer, or I can literally tear down a building with a hammer. That is how we have to understand these as tools. We take them as ubiquitous. Everybody has one now. Everybody needs one now. If you don't have a smartphone, you're kind of like, whoa, that's so like old school, right? People say if you don't have a smartphone. And it's just the way our society is moving. It's the expectation. I understand that. What I say is, before we embrace it, like I need it without any questions asked, if you do it, like know what you're getting into, right? Now, it's like, the same way you get a car, you need to understand how to operate the car. Otherwise, you can do some serious damage with it. Or it can be a wonderful tool. You can do amazing things with it. Now, the pros and cons of social media as tools. The pros are it connects people and groups, and it updates people around the world. The recent example of that is, if you look at what happened right now, let's just take a common example. What happened in Gaza this summer, right? With the Gaza conflict, the war that happened with the Israelis invading, right? I'm not talking about politics. I'm just saying that it gave Muslims all over the world, through Twitter, through videos that were uploaded, through live blogging and tweeting and Facebook, kind of statuses. It gave people around the world a window into what was happening as it was going on. And what happens is now that is fascinating because you traditionally had a vertical media structure where you had a gatekeeper, and these are people, the editors and producers of media and content, and they basically determined what you and I, as the consumers of information, were exposed to. What it's done is it's flattened that out. Now it's much more horizontal, that you can have people on the ground, na'udhu billah, may Allah protect us, as they're being bombed and as they're being attacked and being invaded, they're blogging about it and they're tweeting about it, and it's being picked up instantaneously around the world. And so maybe you and I can't solve the problem, but you and I are aware of it, right? That's a very powerful thing. And if you go back a few years ago with the Arab Spring in Egypt, in what was happening in Egypt, the tragedy of what's happening in Syria, right? I mean, unfortunately, Syria has really been kind of dwarfed by what happened this summer with the other conflict. May Allah protect the people of Syria. Bilad al-Sham is a blessed place as mentioned in our tradition. And, the hundreds of thousands of people that have been brutally killed, raped, massacred, and brutalized is just heartbreaking. You know what I mean? That in itself is a tragedy that we are forgetting about. Hazrat Bilal radiallahu anhu was buried in Damascus. Hazrat Khalid bin Walid radiallahu anhu was buried there. These are our akabirin, these are our elders, right? and they're being desecrated in this way. So what I'm saying is that it gives us an update about what's going on in the world. The other thing is it connects groups and people. Right now, alhamdulillah, thumma alhamdulillah, like the Darul Hidayah program, I was able to benefit from. You guys are teaching, you're posting these things online. This is being live streamed as we speak. Now, mashallah, a lot of our shuyukh, they have blogs, they have Twitter followings, they have like YouTube accounts, and all of these things are beneficial because there's beneficial knowledge out there that you can get, and at the end of the day, it just keeps you connected, right? I mean, I'm in touch with my family all around the world that I couldn't have been in a way before. So that's the pros. You understand those, right? Now, what are the cons? The flip side of the coin is that it's incredibly distracting. The nature of this is that it can be very addicting, and it can be distracting. It can be a time suck. You go on, you think, oh, I'm just going to check Twitter for like 2 minutes, right? And then 10 minutes later, 20 minutes later, you're like, I'm still on Twitter, like I should have like prayed already, you know what I mean? My salah is getting qada, or I should have like done X, Y, or Z, any other thing, right? It can be a huge time suck. The nature of the internet is this, interestingly enough, that's the idea of hyperlinking, right? Whereas before you sat down and you read a text, right? I read a text from beginning to end. Maybe I had some questions, I jotted down some notes in the margins, etc., etc., and then I would move to a different text or a different article, whatever you want to call it. Now the nature of hyperlinking is it's fascinating, even philosophically, the way you read. You don't read linearly. You don't read from beginning to end. You read something and then 2 paragraphs down, you see a link, right? And you're like, oh, I want to check this out. And then you've jumped over here to another article. You didn't finish the first article, okay? Then you're there, and a paragraph down, you've hyperlinked to another thing. Your mind begins to think discursively, which is fascinating because now you're connecting dots and making, your mind is thinking tangentially, and you're doing this to this to this to this to that. That's fascinating. That's all well and good, right? But what's the problem? Many of us can't sit and read an article straight through. So that nature of the way hyperlinking has done is that, I could have sat down and spent 20 minutes reading an article. Well, I mean, even a dunyawi article, even for work or for your studies or whatever. Now, an hour later, I haven't even finished my original assignment, and I've like read 5 other things, and all in bits and pieces. You see what I'm saying? That has an effect. It has an effect. There's a good and a bad way of consuming information in that way. The number 2 thing is that it has a false sense of connections and friendships. People think, oh, I have like 1,000 friends on Facebook. I have all these people that follow me on Twitter. That connection doesn't mean that's a real connection, right? As we said before, the real connection is a human connection. It's human to human. I sit with someone. I eat with someone, right? I sit and I go to the park and we go for a walk, or we're driving around and we're talking, and I'm building a social rapport with that person, right? An empathetic relationship with that person. Versus, now I can be tweeting back and forth and have this conversation that the rest of the dunya is watching, right? Or maybe I'm just texting with this person, and I don't have that same level of connection with people. And I think there's something deep in our psychology, in our fitrah, in that, that's the power of suhbah, the power and benefit of company. When you sit with people, right? There's so many of the teachings of our akabirin, of our elders, right? There was one quote they said about Imam Malik rahmatullahi. They said Imam Malik, we learn more from watching Imam Malik and from observing his adab than we learn from his dars. We learn more from the majlis of Imam Malik in observing his adab and being and sitting with him and watching how he behaved than we did from the dars of the kitab that he was teaching. Our Shaykh told us that, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahmatullahi, that Imam Ahmad, they said 2,000 people, or Allahu alam the number, but it was a massive number, used to go to his dars every day in the masjid. Only 500 of them were tulabul ilm, were students of knowledge. Meaning, 3/4 of the people that went to his dars weren't even students of knowledge. They were simply people that said, I have a business, I have a shop, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and by the chance I want to go and sit in the majlis of Imam Ahmad for maybe 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, 1 hour, and just benefit from his adab, from the barakah of the majlis, from being in a place where the barakah is, right? The malaika are surrounding these majalis, being there, and they're not writing down notes, they're not learning masail about fiqh and this and that. They're not going into tafsir, but they want to benefit. Only 1/4 of those people were actually his students of knowledge. What I'm saying is this is what happens when you have suhbah, when you have beneficial knowledge of companionship with people. And the third thing is that it's very spiritually murky, right? This is from Imam Zayd. I really like this expression. Like when you go to like a river, or you go to like there's a canal and there's a stream. Sometimes you can see the water is clear and you can see in it, and sometimes it's very muddy, right? And you're like, I don't know how deep it is. If I step into it, is it like a foot deep? Is it 5 feet deep? I don't know what's going to happen when I step down into this. And that can be the nature of some of these things, is that once you get into it, you don't know what you're stepping into. It's very spiritually murking for your heart, right? That's the danger. Like, oh, I was just following this debate online or this chat, right? And okay, maybe that's not appropriate for you. Maybe there's things being said that are above your head, first of all, and second of all, maybe ghiba is going to be done. Maybe there's going to be things that are being said that are going to harm you, right? And because of the murkiness there, it's out of your own sense of, inshallah, taqwa, that you avoid these things, right? Now, the critical questions that we have to ask ourselves. What things are distracting us from Allah, from our faith, and from our community? Is my going on Facebook, is my being on Twitter, is my being on like all of the other various forms of social media out there, is it distracting me from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Is it distracting me from my deen? Is it distracting me from my community, from actually being with people, right? Remember that thing I said before? Teenagers today would rather like would either text people than call people. What does that have to say for like them actually being with each other, right? Actually spending time with each other. You know, that's your community. These are people that they have an effect on you, positively or negatively. If it's negative, it's obviously avoid. If it's positive, you want that type of suhbah. In a seemingly hyper-connected world, how do you maintain spiritual ethics and a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? We think we're connected all the time. I can find out what's going on in, like, you know, Pakistan right now with the elections and everything that's going on. I can find out what's going on in the debate, you know, in whatever country, etc., etc. But, you know, I think I'm connected. But, you know, where's the spiritual ethics and connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Where if I'm thinking about the dunya all the time or about this issue or that issue, fine. I mean, it's good to be informed, but the danger is that where's the spiritual ethics behind what it is that you're doing? You know, what's the maqsad? What's the goal behind you doing this? And I'm not saying that technology is inherently bad. Please don't misunderstand me. You know what I mean? I don't deny it. I have an iPhone, right? And you know, I'm on Facebook. I have some of the people here, mashallah, are my friends on Facebook and things like that. And I look to our teachers and our shuyukh. You know, they're using it beneficially with like posting videos to YouTube and doing online classes, and you know, posting on these social platforms and that kinds of things. And you know, this is what Sheikh Faraz Rabbani says, is that it's all about the niyyah behind why you're doing it, and then also how you use it, right? So I'm not saying you don't do these things, but too many of us aren't using it for the right purposes. But not saying it's bad, but reflect on challenges of technology today, of mass destruction and mass distraction. The problem today is, for a lot of us, we're so consumed by this that we're not having those, you know, relationships now. People think like, oh, what do I need to go to the masjid for? Now, I'm not, please don't get me wrong, I'm not critiquing like live streaming. That's wonderful, mashallah. There's people for whom, because of their job, because of their personal situation, because of their health, whatever it is, they can't come here. They need to watch the YouTube videos and watch the live streams and things like that. But, you know, if a person thinks it's like, oh, what's the big deal? Like, I'll just watch it on live stream, or I'll watch when it comes uploaded to YouTube later, right? You're missing several things. You're missing the benefit and the ajr and reward of coming to the masjid, to the house of Allah, to coming to majlis al-ilm, to coming to the gathering of knowledge, coming to the majlis al-dhikr, the gathering of the remembrance of Allah. You're missing out from coming and being with mu'mineen wal mu'minat, with believing men and believing women, you know, and the benefits that brings from it. Now, you have to ask yourself, realistically, you're saying to yourself, and I'm guilty of this, oh, I'll take the online class, I'll watch the YouTube video later. What happens? You're like, people are like on Facebook doing something else. People are like on email doing something else. They're not benefiting from it, you know, to the as they should be. Now, critical questions. Technology stimulates the minds and distracts. This destroys focus and attention because we're bombarded with stimuli. There is a conversation right now going amongst neuroscientists, is that this idea of neuroplasticity. I'm not an expert on this by any stretch of the imagination, but what happens is that there are people that are saying, we're so bombarded with stimuli now, right? My Facebook feed keeps getting updated. My Twitter feed keeps getting updated. And I'm jumping from here to there to there. And that I can't have any one focus and level of concentration, right? Is, what does that do when I need to sit down and focus on something? When it comes down to read, dunyawi or dini wise, when I need to read for my work, right? I need to focus and get through a text or a document for school, for my job, etc., etc. That's even more difficult now, right? When I need to sit down with a book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? I'm always thinking like, It's not, I'm not being stimulated. I'm not having that cue and response kind of thing. How do you attain peace and tranquility with stimulation? The idea there is that if I'm always being stimulated, like my WhatsApp is going on and I'm getting text messages, etc., how can I actually sit and have a long conversation with a friend, with a parent, with my child, with my children, right? Where I need this kind of like constant bombardment with kinds of things like that. Can you concentrate in the absence of stimulation? One good example of that, our scholars say, is imagine what your Ramadan was like. Now it's gotten to the point that people say, Ramadan Som is about tika. I don't eat, I don't drink, I don't look at haram things. In the old days, our teachers used to tell us, okay, the fard fasting is you're not eating and drinking, okay? You're not ingesting anything, you're not consuming anything. Then they said the better fasting is you're not watching television or listening to haram things, right? And exposing yourself to those kinds of haram things. And that's like better for your deen. It's better for your heart. Now people are saying, okay, are you doing an electronic fast? Even non-Muslims are talking about the concept of electronic fast. Can you deactivate your Facebook account for 1 month? Can you get off of Twitter for for the month of Ramadan? Can you stop going on YouTube constantly and watching videos of this and videos of that? Because that's part of your Som, part of your fasting. Literally, what is Som? Som is I'm withholding consumption, right? I'm stopping the consumption. Can you do that? Can you concentrate in Taraweeh? Can you sit down in Ramadan and really do muraqabah and these kinds of things? For some of us it's a challenge, and we need to be aware of that. This affects 3 areas of our lives: our spiritual and religious lives, which I've tried to talk about, intimacy, and social interactions. Right? All 3 of these things are affected by technology. Now, what do I mean by these? Our spiritual and religious lives are, people are watching too much nonsense. We all would like to think that we're watching Islamic videos on, there's all these great YouTube channels now that have, scholars, lectures and things like that by Ustad Numan Ali Khan and Mullah Abdul Nasser Jangda and Imam Suhaib Webb and you name it, Mufti Hussain Kamani and the whole spectrum. They're wonderful. I like those. I have those bookmarked. We would all like to think that that's what we're using our time for. But let's be honest. Most of the time, or at least much of the time, that's not what we're using our things for, is benefiting from social media for that, right? And you need to just be aware of that. If it's not, you just be honest with yourself, right? The first step to this is being honest with how we're doing it. And if anything, even the scholars will tell you, watching a video is never going to replace sitting in the dars. It can't. Sitting in the dars is how it should be. Watching the video is only secondary because it's a tool, right? It's like a backup mechanism to that. Second is intimacy. And again, I'm going to say this just for the sake, this is an uncomfortable topic, right? And I know that there's younger people in the audience, but by what a lot of people are being exposed to with the haram that's out there on the internet, okay? If you can read between the lines of what I'm saying, that now studies, even by non-Muslim social psychologists, right, are coming out. There's literally books have been written on this stuff, research papers and symposia have been held on this stuff, that the exposure that you can do that's literally just, fingertips away within seconds. Young people, especially young men, are more susceptible than young women, that they're being exposed to right now when they get married, and they need to understand how to, that intimate part, which is a part of our deen, which is a part of our life, right? It's all about being balanced. That's affecting them. There's studies coming out, right, on how this is affecting people's intimacy with their loved ones, with their spouses, right? This is a tragedy. Think about the fitna that shaitan has created with this. That shaitan is having a field day with this, which is the most halal thing that we can do to be in the world, right? In that sense, even that is being affected by this, right? I mean, there's young kids in the audience, so I don't want to get into too much detail about this. Maybe if people have questions, we can talk later, but trust me, this is a crisis. They had a special session with Shayukh a few years ago at a major conference just on this, and they asked all the young kids to go out. You had to be over a certain age to be in that session because they were very explicit with the things they were talking about. Because the job of the ulama, the job of our teachers, the job of, that they have to warn us of the dangers of these things. And young people, when you get to an age when you're mature and intellectually you can understand and morally you can grasp what's going on, that people have to warn you, right? If they don't warn you, then what happens? You get caught up in this. And the last is social interactions. People don't understand these things. Now I'm going to break it down. Spiritual and religious lives. Technology becomes a master of our lives and harms our souls. We're habituated to stimuli, so the deen becomes difficult. Now people have these, oh, I need like a 5-minute YouTube video iman boost, right? I want to watch this YouTube video, it's going to like boost up my iman and make me feel good. Then when you sit in the khutbah, you're like, Imam Saab's like taking 30 minutes, it's like too long. Can't you give me the khulasa? Give me the summary, right? Do it like, give me a fast, like here are the bullet points of the khutbah style. For the khatibs, you know what I'm talking about. You're giving a khutbah and half the audience is sleeping. Now, a couple of things could be going on. Maybe we need to write better khutbahs. And I'm saying this as a khatib first and foremost to myself. Second is, maybe the people out there, they're just not interested in listening to a 30-minute khutbah or 20-minute khutbah or whatever. They need like the 3-minute video, okay, on YouTube. Halaqas, the idea of the halaqah, the dars, is you go, the dars is long. The ustad is going through a section. It's 1 hour long, right? And then you do Q&A time. People are like, oh, I don't have time for halaqas anymore. I need to go to Twitter. There's a lot of great sites that have Islamic quotes. I follow a lot of them online. That's great. You find some great quote from Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Junaid Baghdadi, Imam Hassan al-Basri or something like that. That's great. But you reading one quote versus you sitting in a dars for 1 hour and listening to the kitab being taught by the ustad, that's different things, right? To your salah, to your dhikr. When's the last time someone could sit down and sit and do some tasbihat and not get distracted about what's going on? That's what I mean, is that the nature of this stimulation, constant stimulation, is affecting our lives. Worship should induce sakina, right? A sense of sukoon. This is antithetical, to incessant stimulation. The idea of when you're in dhikr, you're doing sakina, is you have this like calmness. It's not like, oh, what's going on? Let me see what's going on with my friends. What are they chatting about? What's going on here? This and that. Anti-authoritarianism in deen, right? And now many of our scholars have talked about this, the problem of Sheikh Google, right? It's like, oh, why do I need to go ask Mufti Saab when like Sheikh Google is there? I'll just go ask him, is this halal? Is this haram? What's the ruksa on this? Right? Can I get out of this, etc., etc.? No, go ask someone. Go ask the men and women of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? That know the deen of Allah and that can teach it to you, right? This is a problem with our young people. Okay, fine, some things are very personal, and maybe you're a little awkward or you're shy or something like that. But develop the relationship with your sheikhs, your shuyukh and sheikhas, right? Go to them, ask them, develop that personal relationship with them, get nasiha from them. This is what our young people don't want today. And these are people that I'm saying care about deen. People that don't even care about deen, they're like, let me see, can I go and do X, Y, and Z? And they Google it and they're like, oh yeah, some forum, some chat somewhere, someone said it's jaiz, so now I can take it. This is the anti-authoritarianism that's leaking into our deen. Anyone can publish any opinion, and it diffuses authority amongst the unqualified to the unsuspecting. This is the unsuspecting. Now, I'm going to say this one point because it's one thing to see some kid is like, oh, can I like eat this? Like, is this burger chain halal? Let me just go Google it and see what's going on out there. That's one level of a problem. The deeper level of a problem, which we need to be very serious about as well, is what? The unqualified are passing it along to the unsuspecting. What does that mean? Hopefully some of us haven't been exposed to this, right? But because I've been in conversations with scholars and with authorities, etc., with law enforcement, you do have the phenomena where you have young people, they want to know. They're upset about what's going on in the world. They have this like passion, right, and drive. They're looking for answers. What can I do? Why is the world so unjust? Why is there so much fitna and tribulation in the world going on right now? So they go on to chat rooms, they watch YouTube videos about people that are posting nonsense, right? It's nonsense, right? It's not from ulama, it's not qualified, it's not the jamhur, it's not the majority opinion of our deen, of what the ulama ikram are saying. They go on and they watch this stuff, they listen to this, they engage with these chat rooms. And what happens is you have some 15-year-old kid that's on his laptop watching this stuff, being exposed to this stuff. You have some 25-year-old guy that's watching this, being exposed to it. They get all kinds of crackpot ideas in their head. And na'udhu billah, the next thing you know, you have some like fitna in your community. Someone's going and they're talking about this in the masjid, in the parking lot. Let's go out and hang out and have pizza on Friday night, and they're giving them weird ideas. If you understand where I'm going with this, right? This is the problem of what they're calling radicalization, right? I'm saying as the Muslims, we have had struggles in dealing with law enforcement, right? Because if they've been unethical, how they've done this, where they've sent in agent provocateurs and all of that. I understand that, right? I've been in those kinds of conversations with people on national security and all of that. What I'm saying is this. There's an element of truth to the fact that we do have people in our communities that are saying crazy things. And we need to be aware of that. And they're getting it. They're not getting it from our imams, because I say our imams are, in the trenches, in the front lines, the ones that are trying to protect our deen and teach the deen properly. They're getting it because they're not talking to the imams. They're not talking to real authorities. They're getting it from like online YouTube videos and chat rooms and stuff like that. That's what I mean, is this is the problem of social media and when it affects our spiritual lives. Now, the intimacy, this is what I talked about before. The web opens avenues of temptation and sin through total accessibility, right? What in the old days you had to go and find out this fitna, you had to like go to shady parts of town and shady bookstores and that kind of stuff. Now you can literally, it's accessible all over the world at any time, right? The immoral use of technology. There's the zina of the eyes, zina of the ears, and zina of the heart, right? Whether it's you're looking at haram images, whether you're texting and talking like men and women are communicating, in illicit, irresponsible ways, etc., etc. This is a statistic I pulled up a couple 2 years ago or something like that. That 50% of divorces, this is what was alleged, of divorces in the past year were due to Facebook, because of rekindled past relationships. They're starting new ones, right? There's physical infidelity, which is that when you physically commit zina with someone, right? You go, you touch them, and you do certain things that get to a point of zina, like as is, defined in one sense in Sharia. And there's emotional infidelity. Emotional infidelity is what? I'm not getting the love and attention and care that I need from my spouse. So it's someone at work, someone that in my class, someone that I'm friends with. And either it's in person or they're texting me late at night, or they're just texting me. And they're asking me, how are you doing? They're asking me about what's going on in my life. And then that, just, hey, what's up kind of thing becomes something more. And it becomes something more until it becomes emotional infidelity. Emotional infidelity is that you feel like you're cheating on your spouse. I'm sharing things with this stranger, na'udhu billah, that I wouldn't even tell my own spouse. They know more about me and my personal life and my feelings and emotions than even my spouse does. That's when you're crossing the boundary. This is zina of the heart now, right? Because your heart should be with your spouse. It should not be with so-and-so at work or so-and-so when you're, that you're studying with or whatever. This is the danger of the world we live in. I'm not saying this to scare people. I'm saying we need to understand it, right? The study, this was done actually with like a non-Muslim test group, right, that they use in the study. But I'm saying is the rekindling of past relationships, right? People, you find each other on Facebook. Oh, I went to high school with this person 15 years ago, 20 years ago, etc., etc. We were kind of friends back then. Now we're like Facebook friends, and I'm showing them pictures about my life, etc., etc. And there's been documented cases of this, where so-and-so was like, wow, what's up? And you're just chatting, you're G-chatting all the time then, etc., etc. And now you're more interested in spending time with this person in their life than you are with your own spouse. Right? You see where I'm going with this? Like, this is the dangers of what we need to understand that young people are exposed to, that our communities are exposed to, and social interactions. Jeopardized because we've lost adab, the etiquette of communication. And some of this are more guilty of this than others, right? Example is casually interrupting a call to text someone. I'm having someone in my living room and they're talking to me, right? And I'm trying to have a conversation with someone. And then, like someone's texting me, and I'm like not even like paying attention to the person, or we're having coffee and I'm just like texting them, looking up once in a while, texting them or calling them, blah, blah. Now, there's times when you have like, there's no takalluf between you and your friend. It's like, hey, do you mind, like my so-and-so is texting me, I have to take care of this. They're like, yeah, no problem. The problem is that children do this with their parents now, and parents do this with their children. They'll be with their children at the dinner table, and then the parents will just be like, oh, it's for work. I have to do this. Or the masjid board is calling me. Or so-and-so, my friend, is calling me, blah, blah, blah. There's times and places to do that. But if this is intruding in your family time, this is very problematic. Disconnected from family because of friends. And it goes both ways. When you have kids that are at the dinner table and they're like down here and they're texting and they're not talking to their parents, and parents that have the phone, some families, I know this, they say there's a no phone policy at the dinner table. And that's a good thing. Alhamdulillah. May Allah give us all tawfiq to aspire to that. Unless you're like a doctor, right? And like, you have to get a call, like I'm on call or something like that's going to be beep. Honestly, it should be put away. And I'm criticizing myself first and foremost for this. It should be put away, and when you're having, you're eating, this is, if you have, obviously the niyyah of how we're supposed to eat, the sunnah of how we eat, that in itself is a time of blessings for you, right? That food is a barakah from Allah. Suhbah is eating with people is a sense of barakah, right? Can be a sense of goodness for you. And then to just like be like scrolling down and looking at your Facebook feed and all that kind of stuff. Like this is just, it's very, very harmful for both children and adults. We need to be people that set this aside. There was a big article that came in the New York Times about a week ago. I really recommend people read it. Just Google it. It's called that, Steve Jobs, everybody knows who Steve Jobs is, right? Steve Jobs was like the iconic leader of, the inventor of the iPhone, of the iPad, of the iPod and all of that. He was the CEO of Apple. Steve Jobs died recently, from cancer, and so, but the guy that interviewed Steve Jobs once, he wrote an article and he said that, I went to Steve Jobs and I was talking to him. He said he doesn't let his kids be on the iPad. He didn't give his kids social technology. Now, I'm guilty of this. I'm being frank with you because we're, friends, and I'm saying this only because it can, inshallah, make myself better, is that, he wouldn't give his kids like an iPad, go play with it, give them an iPhone and go hang out with the iPhone. He understood, the guy that invented the technology understood how harmful it was, what it did to children, right? Socially, emotionally, neurologically, the effects that these have on children. So I'm saying this to the young kids as well, is we need to understand, just because your friends are doing it, everyone, like you're 13 years old and everyone's got an iPhone right now. If your parents say you don't need an iPhone, you need to understand the hikmah behind your parents saying you don't need to have an iPhone. Or if they give you limited access on the iPhone, limited screen time it's called, that's a blessing for you. Understand that. Some parents that I know, they say no screen time. Screen time is what? You can't go on your laptop. You can't go on the phone. You can't go on the iPad on school nights. And on weekends, you get a limited amount of time, right? There's a profound hikmah in that. The dangers of narcissism. Now, you know what Facebook and all these things do is, when you're like snapping selfies, a selfie is in Arabic, right? Selfie, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf says this. Selfie in Arabic is what? Nafsi, right? As in the nafs equals self, it translated. So nafsi is not a good word in Arabic. In our tradition, nafsi is a bad thing to say, oh, myself, myself, myself. Right? I'm just worried about myself. You become like narcissistic. So when people are like out there posting selfies day and night, I mean, it's honestly very like, it's very like revolting, in my opinion. Like people are there, they're like Instagramming everything they eat. Like, oh great, mashallah, you're having some great dinner at some restaurant. Jao khana khao, eat your food, man. Go eat your food, go do what you need to do. Why are you like transmitting to the whole dunya, I'm at this place eating dinner, I got the greatest halal burger in the universe. You know what I mean? Like, okay, great, mashallah. Good for you, okay? I mean, see, I'm saying that it's about what is your maqsad? What's the goal behind this, right? People are posting selfies, day and night. Is that it becomes very narcissistic? What does that mean? When 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old kids, like, when adults do it, you're like, man, that's kind of pathetic that you're posting selfies all the time. But when children do it, what happens? They think everything revolves around them. They think this world, like, you'll see it. The age of being a teenager, a 12-year-old, a 14-year-old, an 18-year-old, you think that everything is about me. And when it's all about how many likes do I have on Facebook, you equate the world liking you with how many likes you have on Facebook. How many times did I get this retweeted? Oh, that was only like 50 likes. Like, oh, that was a really bad post. Like, I need to like have a cooler picture. I need to come up with like funnier things to say, blah, blah, because I'm not getting this many likes, etc., etc. What does that tell you? That's a problem internally. That's a ruhani problem. That's a spiritual problem. Right? To think that like I need this many likes and retweets, because you're equating, people get the point that I'm making? They equate liking on Facebook, the thumbs up thing, with like your self-worth. And they're totally not connected. If you think they're connected, we need to like, break that down even further. Half of our deen is about human interactions, right? Mu'amalat. Half of our deen is about how you deal with people, how you deal with your parents, how you deal with your children, how you deal with your teachers, how you deal with your neighbors, how you deal with your coworkers, how you deal with like random people you see in the street, right? That's half of our deen right there. And these things are affecting that. That's what I want to spend time talking about. Now, suggestions. Educate yourself about the effects of technology and have honest conversations. Don't ignore these issues. Don't think that, oh, I gave my kids an iPad and they're using it for like the most halal purposes. Right? Don't think that I gave my kids an iPhone and they're like using it to watch like good Islamic videos and stuff like that, right? Or they're only texting like their, friends to like help with their homework and their calculus questions and stuff like that. No, the nature is, I'm gonna be very frank with you, half, if not much more of what's going on is that they're like on GroupMe and they're just having like silly conversations and that kind of stuff, some of which can be mundane, some of which can be harmful, right? Talk about screen time. Talk about limiting how your children are using this. Right? You're the parent. You have to set the boundaries. It's hard. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. Kids are going to say, but my friends are doing it. All the kids at school are doing it. This is the challenge of the zamana, of the age that we live in. Kids need to like toughen up and to be like, you know what, you don't need to be popular. Not everything's about being popular in school or fitting in with school. That's hard. I don't want kids to be alienated, but I also don't want kids to think that just because everyone else does it, that you have to like fall into that mentality of doing it as well, right? Find a moderate and balanced way to navigate modern life with these tools. Integration is not and not assimilation. You integrate technology into life. You don't assimilate. Just because everyone is doing it doesn't mean that all you have to be doing it as well, right? It's hard. I'm saying it's about finding that balance. And you know, mashallah, I have to say, more and more slowly, you know, of like our, you know, friends and neighbors, non-Muslims are like recognizing this as well. Because people are seeing the madness that's going on with this. It's slow, it's small compared to what's going on out there, but you know, I know there's like, just because I do a lot of interfaith work, I know there's Christian groups, right, that are like, no, we limit how our kids use technology. We limit the kind of websites our kids can go to, right? Because for them, it's also a moral question. They're saying they don't want their kids seeing this stuff online. They don't want their kids being involved in this fitna. The definition of fitna is basically the same, you know what I mean, with what's happening. Now, it's small. We're still, the tide is against us, but, you know, inshallah, we have to be people that have himmah. We try. You know, we're not going to win every battle, but we try. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, you can't give up with this kind of stuff, right? I mean, put passwords and protections on your computers. Don't put. I'm giving you practical suggestions. Don't put TVs in your kids' rooms. Don't give, when they're young teenagers, don't put laptops into their rooms. You have a computer, have a family computer, and put it in a public place, right? In the living room, in the family room, or something like that. Your kids want to go online to do their emails, to do like go to Wikipedia or whatever, to research for their papers and school projects. Put it in the classroom. Put it in the public place. You don't let them take a laptop and go home. Why? Because they're going to be there like playing Xbox or whatever late hours at the night, and then they're not studying, they're not sleeping, they're wasting their time. Or even worse, you can imagine what they could be doing, you know, that kind of stuff. Islam calls us to be people of greatness, right? Not couch potatoes or distracted consumers. Be engaged and productive in society. Inhale knowledge and exhale activism. That's a quote we got from our teachers. Inhale knowledge, like take in all this ilm, and then exhale activism. Go do something. Use all that time, like, you know, people sit there and play Halo or Call of Duty, or now Destiny's the big game. Right? People play these things and they just like play like 4 or 5, the game comes out and they're like, oh, I got my Gatorade. Hopefully you're not like drinking Red Bull, right? That stuff's really bad for you. They're drinking like Mountain Dew and like eating potato chips and stuff like that. Now there's like mango salsa flavored Lay's potato chips, right? I was in the grocery store I saw the other day. They're like eating this stuff in like 5 hours, 6 hours. They're like, I gotta crack the game, right? I'm gonna beat it. I knew a guy, like Call of Duty, you know, Ghost came out and he's like, you know, the only time he got up was to go to the bathroom and to go pray Salah. And he like prayed it for like 14 hours straight and he like beat the game. Some crazy number like that. I was like, Bachara, man, you're like pathetic. You know, like, I feel so bad for you. That's like, the game came out and like, this is like your big mission in life. And he's like, Kam namaz to pad liya, right? Like, at least I read my namaz. I said, oh, mashallah, that's good. Okay, it's good you read your namaz. But come on, man, you're like 20 years old. You're not like a 12-year-old kid. Okay, I'm saying we have to be real and honest about these conversations in our communities. Right? So it's just, you know, be the type. Islam tells us to be great people. We need to be people. This point is very strong from our ulama. Sheikh Hamza Yusuf talks about this at great length, mashallah. Imam Zayd talks about this at great length. May Allah preserve them. Allah Ta'ala put us here for a reason. Allah Ta'ala put us in this society for a reason. Allah Ta'ala put us in this muasharat for a reason. In this community and society for a reason. We can't just be consumers. I eat whatever I want, I consume whatever I want, I wear whatever I want, you know, I'm distracted by all of these things. The iPhone 6 came out. I mean, I'm not saying this to bash, please don't get me wrong. Like, you know, obviously you see what I'm using right here, right? I mean, I hope I don't fall into, you know, this, or my family doesn't fall into this mistake either. But, you know, I heard on the news the other day, I was getting ready to go to Jummah and I was just listening to the news. And, you know, people waited outside 2 weeks for the release of the iPhone 6. 2 weeks you're waiting outside. What are you doing? You know, what does that say about your job? What does it say about your family? What does it say about your friends? You're literally sitting and sleeping on the sidewalk. That is the epitome of dunya. The epitome of dunya in the sense of you're so distracted from the maqsad, from the goal of your dunya. Okay, Tika, we can say these people, some of them don't know any better. Fine. Why are Muslims so obsessed with this? You have Muslim fanboys, right? Muslim fanboys are like, oh, I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. I have to have the iPhone watch. I have to have the 6 when it comes out. Like, I'm not knocking you to say that it's like, you know, it's bad to want it, but at what expense do you want it? You know what I mean? Like, really prioritize your life. Prioritize your life with what is it that you want to dedicate 2 weeks, 1 week, and days of your life to go out and do. This is the maqsad of, like, that's the agenda of shaitan. Agenda of shaitan is his goal if you're a person of deen. Like, fine, he can get someone that says, go wait outside for 2 weeks, like, you're not sleeping, you're not eating, you're like not going to your job, you're not spending time with your family. Game over, like, you're lost, okay, at that level. If you're a person of deen, like you care about deen, what shaitan is going to do, some of what our scholars teach us, right, is he's going to come and say, you're not going to affect that completely, but it's going to consume your ideas, right? It's like you're always thinking, right? You're praying namaz, oh, when's the iPhone 6 going to come out, right? You're trying to learn something. You're trying to do your job. You're trying to be with your family, and people are like, I wonder like what apps I can download on the watch and do this and that. It's all about breaking the connection you have with Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. And obviously shaitan comes to our nafs in different ways. Different people's nafs is attracted to different things. I'm saying we just need to be aware of this. Allah Ta'ala calls us to be like great people, not to be couch potatoes that are sitting, all the time, being consumed by these kinds of things. So we'll take a break here with this session. We did media and technology. I think it's 12:25. I think we have until 1 o'clock, from my understanding, before we break for prepare ourselves for dhuhr, make wudu, and get ready with the adhan. So inshallah, we have a solid 35 minutes for Q&A. So now we'll open it up for there's Q&A. If there's Q&A with anything that I've covered in the last 2 sessions, inshallah. Okay.
If there's any sisters that have questions downstairs, someone will be coming downstairs to collect them, and inshallah we will bring them up and read them.
Yes.
How do you regulate how to expose your children to email or social media?
Yeah. It's a very good question. It's a very practical question. The question from Hafiz Umar was, how do you expose your kids, and at what age do you expose them to appropriate use of email and social media, etc.? There's 2 things to consider. One is, what are they being exposed to in school? And I'll explain. And then the other is, what are you exposing them to in the house? I'll just use a personal example. Like, my son just got email, right? Like, he's in 5th grade. He just got email now. And he's in in an independent school, and it's very good. I really trust the teachers. I mean, it's a non-Muslim school, but these people understand, like, I like their educational philosophy, right? And they said that, we want to expose them to how to use these things. When they do research projects, they can communicate with other students and that kind of thing. That's good, right? I mean, at this point, he's been exposed to it. He has an email account, etc., etc. I think one rule of thumb is to be an engaged parent, right? Engaged is, it's hard for me to tell my kid don't be on Facebook and Twitter if I'm on Facebook and Twitter all the time, right? It's hypocrisy. Kids are not going to listen to you. They have to see that I'm limiting my use of Facebook and Twitter and social media in order for them to take me seriously, right? That's the first thing. The second thing is, I would say the more general rule of thumb, the more you can delay it, the better. There's no reason for kids to be going on Twitter, right? I mean, at that age, like, what are they getting out of it? They're not, in my opinion, I don't think they're getting the most beneficial things out of it, or Facebook. I would especially say stay off of, like, keeping them off of Facebook. They're going to say, oh, my friends have it. Like, okay, sorry, your friends have it, right? Tell them that Facebook is such a dangerous world right now. That's where cyberbullying takes place, right? That's where a lot of, like, gossiping takes place about people and about this, and that. Stay away from it. It's hard. I mean, nothing that I say is like a definitive answer, to the best of your ability. Or if they're going to go on Facebook, some people say you monitor their account. Like, kids aren't going to like it. They're going to feel like, why are you like my friend, right? Like, obviously, if you are on Facebook and your kids are on Facebook, you would befriend them. You say, like, it's my job as your parent to keep an eye on you, right? Kids are going to think, oh, that's really lame, and that's like so, like really, just why are you doing that, etc., etc. That is the difficult conversation to have with your children. Try to protect them as long as you can, right? I mean, I honestly wish I had a better answer. I would say at least until their teenage years. Before their teenage years, before they're like, 10, 11, they don't need to be on this at all, right? After their teenage years, when they get to middle school, high school, there's going to be pressure, and then just do it responsibly. And the honest thing about this is that if you have an ongoing conversation with your children, and you're very frank with them, and you say, look, here's the dangers of it. You know, don't just say it's bad, it's haram, stay away from it. They're going to be like, what do you do? What does a kid do when you tell them that? Naked, don't do this. Kid's going to be like, Kyun, why? I want to do it. You told me not to do it. I'm going to go and do it. That's some part of, like, you know, human nature. The more you tell people stay away from it, the more they're going to get attracted to do it, right? There's a beautiful example that Sheikh Hamza Yusuf uses. He says, like, you know, human beings are unique in that they're the only creature that when they see a fire, they go check it out. He goes, other animals that Allah Ta'ala created in His makhluk, is that if they see a fire, what happens? They run away, right? There's a fire in the forest, the deer run, right? Rabbits, they're going to run, right? Other creatures are going to escape the danger. Human beings are like, oh, wow, look at that. Let's go check out what's going on over there, right? So if you tell people, no, don't do it, it's dangerous, part of the nature of people is they're going to want to go do it. So if you have a conversation with your kids and you say, here are the dangers of what this world holds, right? Is that you're going to be exposed to haram images. You're going to be exposed to really harmful things. The things people talk about, right? The kind of websites that you're going to be exposed to. You know, the kind of things that your friends are going to talk about. A lot of what people are on Facebook doing is just like, you know, it's nonsensical conversation. It's not like they're quoting or, you know, linking to really amazing articles. And I mean by amazing articles, you know, Islamic or non-Islamic articles, right? That kind of stuff. It's hard to fully answer your question, to keep them away from it, but if you have an ongoing conversation when they're young, and you limit screen time, right? When you limit something, it's easier to slowly give them access to it. If you give them access to it up front, and then you try to limit it, then that's much harder, right? So, yes? Yeah. Yeah. So you're asking about is that a good thing? So the question was is that, you know, now we have a lot of apps and, you know, a lot of educational software that on phones, on iPads, on tablets that teach the kids these things. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I've tried using some of those myself. I think there's a value into that, but I'm kind of old school, and I still think that there's a benefit to, like, when you sit down with a book and you sit down, teacher and student, pen and paper, and you learn those ways, that should be the primary mode. All of these other things, these apps should be supplemental. So for example, one idea is, you know, normally you have a routine, you're learning and going over the kitab and learning and studying in a certain way. Then you go on a trip, you're in the car, you're traveling, you don't have access to all the materials you normally would have. Then you can give them an app, right, and say use this as a supplementary kind of thing. You know, I think, you know, we just need to be smart about how we use it. We're not anti-technology. We just need to be very careful about how we use technology. You know what I mean? That's just the nature of the world that we live in now. Like the Steve Jobs example where they had extremely limited and restricted use, I think that's still a good thing to aspire to. For some of us, that's just maybe not. You know, honestly, how do some of us use it? If your kids are older, you're like, oh, the kids are, you know, they're bothering me, I'm tired, I'm busy, etc., etc. So you hand them the phone and you go play a game online. Right? I mean, some of us, we've done it, right? And we're guilty of that. Try to avoid that kind of thing, you know what I mean? Because you don't want kids to get too used to that. You know, it's easier said than done with all of this kind of thing. You know, I mean, I wish I had a better answer, but limited use is what we aspire to. It should be the goal, inshallah. You know, I'll get your question in 1 second. You know, I'll just give you a couple of things. And this is just speaking from experience. You know, I myself need to keep doing research, and the research that comes out and the positives and benefits and negatives of this technology. But, you know, one thing that I really like and that we aspire, inshallah, to have in our house, there's a thing called QBT, quiet book time, right? And, you know, I honestly, now there's like a fancy word for it. I learned from my kids' teachers, but I look back at like my father. You know, my father is a doctor, alhamdulillah. He worked very hard. If your parents are doctors, engineers, professionals, they run businesses. You know, like they're so busy, especially fathers, is that they're so busy, you know, 8, 10, 12 hours a day working for a living to bring home, you know, good halal sustenance for their family. I understand how hard it is, right? I mean, we look and we like value our parents so much more for what they did. Or your mothers, you know, they're so busy taking care of the affairs of the household. I don't mean to minimize the work of the mother at all. But you know, my father, like, he did this thing with us when we were like, teenagers. That's when I remember it from. And he said, "Beta, sit down," to my older brother and I, and he would say, "Sit down, let's read." And my father would read his books, for his studies, or he would read the paper, and he would say, "Jao, go get a book, do your homework, go get a magazine, go get a good book, and like read it, and just like sit in the living room for 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes a day, and like that's it. No TV, no outside distractions, no phones, no texting. You just sit there and read, right?" That, I think, it's ideally it should be more than that, but if you can do that consistently, like that has a powerful effect, right? Some of our ulama say this is the power of, like, when you do ta'aleem every night with your children, right? Do ta'aleem, 10 minutes of ta'aleem, 15 minutes of ta'aleem, right? Even if you do it consistently, children thrive on routines. That's one of the things that a lot of the research and our experience of our akabirin, of our elders, teaches us. Have a regimented schedule for your children in their life. Have a way they get ready in the morning, right? Have a way, like, this is a routine. When and how you eat, you brush your teeth, you change your clothes, you make your bed, you read your Quran, you read your namaz, when you go to school, when you come home from school, your bedtime, your evening routine, when you do your homework, etc., etc., when you do your ta'aleem, when you do your quiet reading time as a family. I think children thrive, and there's a great benefit in having a regimented schedule. Now, it's tough. We live in an age where a lot of us, our jobs are like, you work extra long hours at work. Mothers are, for example, if they're a homemaker at home, they're like stressed because you have multiple kids, have multiple things going on, etc., etc. Maybe you can't always do it every day, but it's what you aspire to try to do to have a routine. I think there's a great benefit in that, inshallah. Yes, you had a question. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, subhanAllah. Okay. That's a very good question. I can. My kids are not at that age yet, and may Allah protect all of us when our kids do get at that age, and give us hikmah and sabr. They're not at that. Huh? Oh, repeat the question. I'm sorry. The question was that from Hafiz Umar was that when your kids get to an age where they start becoming more independent and vocalizing their attitude, right, and their disagreement with you, how do you deal with them and not get upset and lose your temper and escalate the situation, etc., etc. It's a very good question. It's something that I'm not at that stage yet, I was saying, and I'm still trying to work through. There are really good books out there. I think, inshallah, some of this covers it, right? Some of this book on the parenting books by the Qadri brothers does mention this as well. There's basic tips. Beware of your own temper. Beware of your tone of voice. Don't ever make threats or say things in the heat of the moment or when you're angry, in that kind of, when you're in that hal, in that state, right? You say, human beings by their nature, ghussa is something we all deal with, right? You may say something hurtful, they may say something hurtful, but I think coming back to the center is that when you cool down or they cool down, having someone else to be able to mediate that. These are all different strategies. I think that, say, like, let's talk about this, let's have a rational conversation about this, right? Say that I'll meet you halfway. Let me listen to you, you listen to me, right? These are strategies that I think work to different degrees in different situations that you try to use. I think part of it is that as a parent, knowing and understanding the psychology of children, in that developmentally they're going to get to the point where they're going to exert their independence. They're going to want to say things and talk back to you, right? You have to be prepared for that. Don't just be like, oh, how dare you? I never talked to my parents like that. Well, if you think like that, chances are you probably did talk to your parents that way. You probably did do some, disrespect in your tone of voice, in your language, and the things that you said to your parents. And you later on regretted it. So don't be shocked when your kids do that, but just understand that they're kind of at that phase. Now, you can't let them get out of control. You're the parent. You need to set the boundaries. You need to set the rules. And you just say, if these things happen, there's going to be consequences, right? Not empty threats, because if you have empty threats and kids, they'll see that you're kind of bluffing, right? Where you say, if this happens, if you talk to me like this, or you keep doing this or that, here are the consequences, right? I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. I'm going to take away this. You're going to lose these privileges. Certain things are going to happen, right? Kids need to know that that's the way that the world works, right? They can't just get away scot-free. It's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. It's very hard, especially living in a society in which there's increasingly less consequences, right? Kids get away with all sorts of nonsense with their friends and in schools and that kind of stuff. So like we say, it's an uphill battle for many of us, right? Does that help answer your question? Okay, it's hard. I wish I had a more definitive answer. Like, you do X and Y is going to happen, right? It's like a magic formula. I don't know. I mean, we come back to the stories of the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam. Nuh alayhi salam's own child, right? He didn't believe, and he ran away and and insulted and disobeyed his father. You know what I mean? Yaqub alayhi salam's children did this, to him. When it came to Yusuf alayhi salam, like, this is the nature of like just dealing with youth. You know what I mean? The Sahaba, many of them, not many of them, but some of them struggled, right, with their kids, because this is real life. This is the nature of real life. It's important for us to know that as well. The kids are going to do things wrong. They're going to say things wrong. They're going to disrespect us. But it's how you, like, after that, how do you deal with it? Inshallah. A very good question. The question from downstairs, I believe, is to control our nafs is one of the hardest things to do, especially in our youth. We like being on social media. How do we limit ourselves from that? Also, is there a zikr or adhkar that we youth should recite on free time? So there's basically two parts to that. The first is, yes, definitely controlling your nafs is one of the hardest things to do. This is the nature of how Allah Ta'ala has created us, especially in your youth, right? Because the passions of youth can get inflamed. And yes, youth like being on social media. Even some of us adults like to be on social media, and we can't get off of it. This is where we need to like really have high himmah. We need to say, what kind of person do I want to be? Do I want to be the kind of person that's always like obsessed with this drama with my friends on this Facebook or that, or on GroupMe, or Snapchat or WhatsApp, and what's going on, this and that? Because that's the easy lowest, that's what we call the path of least resistance, right? That's the easy thing to do, to fall prey to that. Understand, we're all human, we're all going to mess up, right? None of us are perfect. We're all going to mess up. The idea is, if you constantly aspire to and tell yourself, I don't want to get consumed by this. I don't want this to dictate my social life. And you set personal limits. One is the parent should set limits. The other is that the youth, like parents, even as the kids get older through their teenage years, parents have less and less influence. Unfortunately, that's the way that it is. So one is, in real life, surround yourself with personal company, with suhbah of good people. Right? With people that like you benefit from their company, and they're not going to be people who are obsessed with this, or if they do go on social media, it's for beneficial things. Remember, I said it's a tool, right? You can go on to do nonsensical arguments and debates and follow like frivolous things like celebrities and that kind of stuff on social media, or alhamdulillah, there's a lot of great platforms out there. There's a lot of great, like, I'm going to mention some of these later, but I'll mention them now, right? Muslim Matters is a great blog, right? Follow Muslim Matters, read it, write for it. Quran Weekly is a great service that comes out now. Like, if you want to be on social media and you want to use it as a tool productively, find what content you benefit from, that you like. I like reading certain blogs. I like watching certain scholars' videos. I like having certain, this is the last one is a little dangerous, but certain conversations with people on social media, right? If you're a student, right, you have limited knowledge, but you say, I want to find out about more, right? So you don't go around gossiping about scholars and about drama, this fitna that's going on in the community, but you say, I'm asking questions, right? Things that you benefit from, okay, then you can share that. Share that. That's what you're tweeting out. That's what you're, posting on your status, as your status and that kind of stuff. That's a good use of it, right? Even for dunya, you can do that. I know people, like in my profession and other people's professions, they read journals and blogs and articles online, and there's good articles, right, that are coming out, right? And this is what they're blogging and tweeting about, right? Now, yes, it's a lot harder to do when you're 15 or you're 18 and you're like, oh, you just want to talk about the latest kinds of things, but you know what? Then we need to be people, like I said, this is about himmah. We need to be people of wazn, of weightiness, serious people, not like loose and frivolous people that are like, part of my language, sometimes I talk like, when I talk to young people, we don't want to be clowns. Some people, they're just nonsensical. The stuff they talk about, the stuff they do online, you're just like, wow, I mean, can you like grow up and mature? Because, again, I don't mean to keep coming back to this example, but I use it because it's where I am and it's what one vantage point I can speak from. But, I happen to be at a, very major, serious, prestigious university, right? I was having this conversation with a brother just earlier, is that, trust me, there's a lot of nonsense and drama that some of these students go through as well there. Muslim, non-Muslim, doesn't matter. But some of these people, what it takes to get there, they're really people of substance. Now, you and I can critique what that substance is, whether it's a substance for akhirah or whether it's a substance for dunya. But even being substance for dunya, they're serious people, right? They say, I want, like these are people that want to be leaders. These are people that want to be movers and shakers. These are people that want to be agents of change. They want to like be, they aspire for youth leadership positions, in high school and in college, right? The stuff they're reading, the stuff they're talking about, the stuff that they're debating, like, yeah, sometimes they get too full of themselves. That's the danger of this, right? But it's at least more worthwhile when they're engaging with like serious conversations than like, oh, this is going on like nonsensical Bollywood drama and Hollywood drama and, drama about your friends and what's going on. This is not gossip and that kind of stuff. Now, I'm not implying, that this is what the questioner is asking, but I'm just saying I find this a lot. What's going out there is be a person that has like, great expectations. You want to do great things, and the kind of things that you're talking about are serious things. I mean, I have conversations with students, with 18-year-olds, with 19-year-olds, with these students, and like, they're thinking about the world. They're thinking about what's going on in Ferguson right now, right? What happened this summer? What's the state of race relations in America? What's the connection between the racism of Ferguson and the militarization of our government, of our police state, and what's going on in Gaza vis-a-vis the Israeli government, right? That's not a separate conversation. There's a connection there. This is what I'm seeing young people, they're talking about this, they're thinking about this, they're reading articles about it, they're posting articles about this stuff. That's a serious person. I can have a serious conversation with that person. I can listen to that person talk and I'm like, wow, I didn't think about that. I just learned something new from this conversation. There are people talking about right now, what's going on with domestic violence issues, in our society, with the way celebrities are portrayed in magazines and Hollywood and that kind of stuff. And then, the NFL, for example, has a culture of negligence towards domestic abuse, right? That people talking about that conversation, that's serious, right? I want imams to be talking about this. What does it say that imams are, I'm not saying this to criticize certain people, but I think that like, there's people that talk big about their favorite football team or their favorite basketball team or following sports, this and that. Okay, fine. Now, you accept part of the NFL, right? You accept it as an institution. Stand up and criticize the NFL, then stand up and criticize that culture. You're like, my favorite team is this, and I'm blogging about that and tweeting about this team going on. Like, you know what I mean? Like, be serious people. That's what I mean. It's a challenge. I don't mean to make it light of it. It's hard to control your nafs when it comes to social media. This is it's like the rules of the game are a lot more challenging, or the deck is stacked against us. How do you limit yourself from that? Set personal limits. Set personal screen time. Right? Say, I'm only going to go on Facebook X number of minutes a day. Right? And then that's it, and you have to hold yourself to it. I'll give you two examples. There's it's all about how you use your time, right? So much of success in life, dunyawi and dini-wise, is time management. This is, you read biography after biography and study after study of the most accomplished people in history, and especially like today, right, with all the distractions that we have, of people that become like amazing politicians, amazing leaders in business, amazing scholars, amazing researchers, amazingly successful people in non-profits and whatever it is, right? It's about how they manage their time. They have routines. And you know what I look back to? There's a book, I'll tell you right now, they say there's books that, have you been following this on Facebook? People are like challenging people, not the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, right? People are challenging you, like, tell me the 10 books that you can, off the top of your head, like, without thinking about it, in 1 minute, what are the 10 books that affected your life, right? People have stepped up to the challenge. There's one book, I haven't done that challenge, right? I mean, the challenge is problematic as well, because people like want to put the best image out there, like, oh, I read this amazing book and it changed my life and I'm such a deep person, right? Okay, khalas, like, I'm glad these books affected your life, but just be honest as well, right? Because this is, again, the nature of narcissism of social media, right? People think it's about what image am I putting out to the world, right? But I can tell you, I was in high school and my teacher gave me a book, Uswa Rasul Akram, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, by Sheikh Dr. Arif Abdul Hayy. He's a Khalifa he was a Khalifa of Hakim Ulummat Rahmatullahi Alayhi, right? Amazing scholar. He passed away. He lived in Karachi, Pakistan, I believe. Amazing scholar. He wrote this book. I read it when I was in high school. It's called Uswa Rasul Akram. and it's the example of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, why am I mentioning this book? When I read this book when I was 15, 16 years old, and there was a whole section of the book that just literally went through the day of the life of the Prophet ﷺ. When he got up, how he ate his food, how he spent time with his family, how he went into the marketplace, how he did his dawah, how he came home, how he did this. That as a teenager was what I was craving. I wanted to look up to a role model. I wanted to look up to a person and say, how can I be successful in the dunya, and how can I be successful in my deen, and just have an impact, right? Now, that book changed my life, alhamdulillah, in that way, and may Allah reward my teachers for exposing me to that. There are so many books, obviously in deen, but obviously even in dunya we matters that you can look at. What am I saying? The thread that comes out of it is of consistency, of routine, of the power of routines, of regimenting and scheduling your life, right? Making pockets of time. There's a pocket of time when you socialize, there's a pocket of time when you do your homework, there's a pocket of time when you do your recreational activities, there's a pocket of time that you set up for yourself. That you study the Shama'il of Imam Tirmidhi rahmatullahi, and you study the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the life of his companions, the life of great people like Salahuddin Ayyubi, the life of just amazing people. Even in the dunya, you study the lives of amazing people and you come away with this. That's what I'm getting at. So what's the point? The point is, when you regiment your time and you say, I'm only going to set half an hour a day of going on social media, pick a time that works for you, right? And challenge yourself a little bit. And then you stick to it, you'll see amazing things. I know students right now, when they're writing their, they're preparing for final exams or writing their term papers, right, or whatever exams in high school or whatever, they will. It's really cool. They didn't have it when I was young, but I also didn't have Facebook when I was their age either. Is that you can lock it. People know this better than I do. You can install a program on your computer that will, for the next week, will lock you out of Facebook and Twitter on your laptop, right? It'll lock you out of your account, and it'll create a password to log in that you don't have, but your friend has. If you appoint someone and your friend has that password, right? So either they can give you the password to log back in. Do people follow me when I'm saying this? It's like a safety mechanism. Or literally for the next 7 days, there's a clock. It's a countdown timer, right? For the next 7 days, you cannot log into your social media. That's amazing. I think that's a practical tool or an app that you're using. You know you have a weakness for going on social media, and you're like, you know what? I know that I will not get to finish my paper. I know I will not study for my exam, my midterm, if I go on and waste my time with this. So you're smart about using the, tools and strategies ahead of you. The other thing I was going to say was that I learned from just observing my students that, these people become very successful, right? When you study success, your habits of success, you learn certain principles. This idea of, and I'm going to answer the other question in just a second. Of limiting your time. The way they limit their time is this. They say, if I'm going to give myself, X amount of time during the day to study, then I have X amount of time to balance, right? So I give myself a half-hour time where I'm just chilling. I can do whatever I want. I mean, not whatever you want, but you see what I'm saying. You can go on social media. Then I have to do a half an hour time of something serious as well, right? This is the challenge here. Say I have to study, no matter what, I have to study a subject, a challenging subject for 30 minutes. Say you don't like calculus, you're I have to sit down 30 minutes, I have to do my calc homework. You see what I'm saying? And that offsets each other. When it comes to the idea of doing a dhikr or doing a adhkar that youth should recite on their free time, I would say I can give you ideas. The best answer you can get is really from your imams, from the ulama ikram, because they knew these much better than I do. But what I have seen works, for example, one example that I'll give you quickly, and this is an advice from one of our shayukh, is that you should always carry what we call subha or tasbih in your pocket. Imam Zayd Shakir told us this once, and Imam Zayd is very famous for saying this, is that when the fact that you have it in your pocket and you have it with you is, inshallah, slowly, when you get into the habit of thinking oh, it's in my pocket, I feel it, I have it with me, I can use it to do dhikr, I'm waiting for the bus, I'm sitting, in the car, driving, going somewhere, okay, etc., doing something, is that I'm using that free time to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You can make tasbihat, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah, make salatu salam, make durood sharif, Durood Sharif is actually amazing. Many of our scholars, there's a beautiful book by Shaykh Muhammad Zakaria rahmatullahi alayhi, Fadali Durood. It's an amazing book. It has all the various kinds of durood that you can recite, and our scholars have said reciting durood has immense benefit and power. So I would recommend doing durood. There's long and short ones that you can do. Any of the stuff, tasbihat, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, that you can do. Just get a habit of doing a wird, right? Doing a certain one of these a day. And if you set yourself up, I'm just going to give you an example. Someone says, I'm going to do one tasbih of Durood Sharif every day. One tasbih of Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah al-Azim every day. One tasbih of Subhanallah. One tasbih of Alhamdulillah. One tasbih of Allahu Akbar. These are not big things, right? I mean, literally it'll take you 1 or 2 minutes to do each one of these tasbihs, right? 100 times. And then you just have a goal. And you say, I want to do 5 tasbihs a day, right? And 5 tasbihs a day is, do the math, is going to take you maybe 15 minutes, okay? Now you say, on my way to my bus stop, on the way to like the train station in the morning, I can do half of that, okay? And on the way home, I can do half of that. And now you're engaging your time like constructively. In that time, otherwise you would do what? You'd put your iPhone on, right, with your headphones and just be listening to whatever. But now you're actually engaging your time. And I use the expression in Urdu, I'll try to describe it. I mean, so much of how we look at, you were based on our teachers, right? Our teachers say that, chalte phirte, right? Like walking, coming and going, doing whatever, are the awliya would just be doing dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you can get in the habit of that, that's what you can recite on your free time, okay? Make a benefit of that. I mean, there's like apps now that kind of do this stuff as well. There's many different examples. But if you ask me, some of the best are do istighfar, say astaghfirullah, to do Durood Sharif, since Durood Sharif's peace and blessings on the Prophet ﷺ, and say, because there's authentic hadith about this, the 2 words that are very light on the tongue but very heavy on the mizan, on the scale of deeds, and very beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah al-Azim. And if you recite that, every day, you make it a habit of these, I would say these are great adhkar. Just keep doing these again and again, and inshallah you'll see the benefit. That's what you can do in your free time. I'll give you another example. Habib Umar, may Allah protect him, who's a very famous scholar from Yemen. Habib Umar he gave a lecture at Yale. We invited him 2 years ago, and someone asked a question, and I remember this. It was a few years ago, but the question like stuck with me. The answer stuck with me. And he said, the guy that was asking it was like a software engineer, right? And he said, I'm an engineer. I sit at my desk and I like work on my computer all day long, for hours and hours at a time. I don't have time to do a long wird and to do a lot of adhkar, right? And he said, can you give me some nasiha? And I was like, oh wow, this is a really good question, because a lot of people, if you're a professional, right, you own a store, you work in an office, you're a lawyer, you're an accountant, you're a doctor, like you're just so busy, you're mashghul, you're occupied throughout so much of your time. What can we do? It's hard to sit down and do dhikr for like 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day. He said, what you should do? This is what Habib Umar's answer was. He goes, in the course of your day, every hour, every 2 hours, just take a break. Just like literally, and think of the psychology behind this. If you're sitting down, stand up, right? If you're standing, then sit down. Break your routine and say, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Make a short dhikr. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah al-Azim. Subhanallah walhamdulillah wallahu akbar. Make any short dhikr, and every hour you just take a break. What is it doing? All this stuff like in efficiency, all these guys that are organizational psychologists, they come into your thing, and they talk about workflow and how do you work more efficiently. They tell you every 50 minutes, every 60 minutes, get up, stretch, go to the water cooler, go use the restroom, take a break because your posture is bad if you're sitting at the computer all day. You see what I'm saying? Like, think of the psychology. There's something really profound there. Whatever you're doing, change your position. And then remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then go back to what you're doing. But the fact that you took a break to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the midst of your studying, in the midst of your working, that inshallah will keep your heart connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some of us think, when I get home, I'll take care of my responsibilities, and then I'll sit down in the corner with the tasbih, and then I'll do a half hour of dhikr and do my wird. Some of us, we can do that, mashallah, that's great, you have himmah. For some of us, we're weak, we don't have that kind of discipline or don't have that kind of time. But if you do these kinds of things, that inshallah will keep your heart connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, that's from my perspective, right? I'm not a scholar, I'm not an alim of deen. You can ask your imam, ask Mufti Saab, ask the other scholars that visit this for their suggestions on these things, but that's what I have seen has worked. Inshallah, I think we can take 1 or 2 more questions and then we'll break. Yes?
goes for our children.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as parents, I know you mentioned I've heard a lot of other, like even our teachers suggest that stuff about this. But as parents, what can we go about that little time we have with our children, like for fathers coming back from work,
Yep.
got a few hours before the end of the day,
Yeah.
with other things going on. What things can we do to instill that environment?
Sure, that's a great question. Actually, it's a beautiful question. And I'm going to answer it briefly, and I'm going to pause. And when we come after Dhuhr and lunch, we'll pick up with it, because my afternoon session is actually in more detail. So I'll answer your question now. The question was that for some of us who are very busy, mothers and fathers who just busy with so many responsibilities during the day, maybe we don't have time to do a proper ta'aleem regularly with our kids. How do we have a positive influence? This is a great thing I'll mention now and we'll pick up. Try to the best of your ability, active involvement in your kids' lives. Active involvement looks like different things to different people. Active involvement, number one, is you have to talk to your kids. Honestly, what I said in the earlier session, what kids are missing today are relationships. They need empathy. They need people to understand who they are, how they're feeling, what they're going through. Because if you're not talking to your kids about what they're struggling with, what they're going through, they're going to go somewhere else to find that. And sometimes where they're going is very scary, right? To actively talk to your kids. How is school? What did you learn today? It sounds kind of corny and cliche because there's like the Cosby Show kind of image of it. That's the show I grew up on, which was like wholesome halal entertainment, right? Now they don't even show stuff like that on TV anymore because the media and society is degraded so much. But just have a relationship with your kids. Your kids come home. So how was school today? Like, what projects are you working on? What do you just talk to them about their friends, about their life, about that kind of stuff. It's not going to be easy. Sometimes kids will put up walls, and I'm going to talk to that about a little later. So I'm going to just give you the quick story about that right now. It feels awkward for parents as well. You're like in your 30s or 40s, and you're talking to your kids, and they're like teenagers, and there's like kind of an age gap and a generation gap as well. Or maybe you're in your 30s, and your kids are still 5-10 years old or something like that. But the more you talk to them about just anything, talk to them about life. The deen conversation will come into it because the deen is about life, right? Deen is about akhlaq. Our deen is about mu'amalat, how you deal with people, how you talk to people, what's going on in the world, what's going on in your life, that kind of stuff. Because if they trust you, if they trust that they can talk to you about things, just inshallah, it doesn't have to be, okay, beta, beti, now we're going to do ta'aleem from the kitab. We're going to sit down and go through that. There's a benefit and there's a time and place for that. But if you just have that rapport, right? There's a famous saying. It's attributed, and we'll end with this inshallah, and then we'll take a break. It's attributed to Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu. Hazrat Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu is reported to have said, and obviously he learned it from where? From Rasul Akram sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said that the first 7 years of your life, play with your children, right? At that age, there's no taklif. They're not responsible. They're not legally responsible, morally responsible. Play with your kids. Spend time with them. Right? I'll actually mention more details of that later, but one quick example is, look at how beautiful it was, the way the Prophet ﷺ behaved with Hazrat Hassan and Hussein radiallahu anhum. Look at that. You know what I mean? The hadith is in Bukhari Sharif, where he's holding Hazrat Hassan, and he's saying, I love him and you should love him as well. And he would hold him in his lap and he would give the khutbah from the mimbar. When is the last time some of us as parents, I can only speak as Desis, right? I don't know about other cultures, right? But as Desis, in some of our cultures, it's not to be affectionate with your children, to play with your children, to these kinds of things. It's not always encouraged, right? But he's showing the best of creation. So some is showing the best of examples with his children, right? When you play with them and you're in that mindset, that frame with them, that has an impact. I'll tell you one quick story. We saw. They said there's a quote, it's a qawl attributed to Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu, and he said when a man is with his children, he should be easy, right? He should just be easy as in don't be serious with your family, with your kids. Just be casual and goofy and play around with them. And when you're with men, then act like a man, right? When you're with adults and you need to be serious and have a certain comportment and demeanor, then that's the time for it. When you're with your family, then be easy, be like chill, just like hang out with them, play with them, and that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Because that has an effect on your kids, on your family, on the mahol, on the environment at home. Number 2, Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu said, the second, one is 0 to 7, right? The next is 8 to 14, right? The next yours is discipline your children. That's the age when you have to do the tarbiyah. You have to teach them right and wrong, discipline them. Don't do this and do this. This is proper behavior. This is unacceptable behavior, etc. And from 15 onwards, then befriend your children. That's the age of you build that rapport, that relationship with them, that friendship with them when they're teenagers. Be open to them. They'll come with you. They'll talk. You want them to talk to you about things. Maybe those things are going to make you uncomfortable. Maybe those things are going to kind of like freak you out, right? But ideally, I slowly you build that relationship with them, and then inshallah they'll be more able to come to you than to go to someone else with some of these issues and concerns, right? And that goes from right up to age 21. After that, they're adults, they're fully, inshallah, mature. Inshallah, they're capable of getting a job or getting to a professional degree program, and they should be getting ready to get married soon as well. We'll talk about that this afternoon, about what's the benefit according to our scholars in our tradition from about being interested sooner rather than later for marriage. You know what I mean? I'll talk more in detail about that, and that's a good template for us to follow. One last thing I want to say, because it's something that I try to keep in mind. Because I end up, Allah Ta'ala has put me in the field of dawah. Alhamdulillah, may Allah accept it. Okay? I give khutbahs, I give bayans, I travel around, and people think, oh, he's like some serious chaplain sahib that gives all these big lectures and this and that. But when I really try, so people have this image they expect you to uphold. People that know me, my friends and my family, they know I'm not a very serious, I like to be a chill guy, right? And I talk and do this and kind of stuff. But I saw it starting affecting my young kids. This is the point that I'm getting at. My kids saw me giving khutbahs, my kids saw me doing all these things, and they saw the way people treat you, and especially for people that do dawah and tabligh and the imams and children of scholars, right? This can have an effect. That's a whole other conversation, as if you're always in the masjid and people are thinking you're doing this work all the time. Kids think that, we can't play with a father, or a mother like this. The point that I'm getting at is this, that I try to take this lesson really seriously from one of our teachers. He said that he saw his teacher. He thought his ustad, his sheikh, was this very big buzurg, very big elder. And all the time they see him giving the dars, leading the halaqah, very serious person. They said one day we were walking in the street and we saw he was just playing with young kids, running around and picking them up and just being what a good parent should be, right? And they said, Hazrat, we're so amazed that you're acting like this. They said this privately to him later. We're acting like this. You were acting like this with kids. He says, because we always see you in the masjid, in the khanqah, acting a different way. And then he said, shouldn't I follow the sunnah of Habibul Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam? That's how the Prophet was. There's a hadith where he would play with Hassan and Hussein and their friends, the young kids in the street. Because this means with kids you have to be at their level. With adults you have to be at their level. Right? And so I say that when it's all about, win their hearts over, inshallah. I think inshallah I'll take a break now. I've went a few minutes over time. My apologies. Inshallah we'll prepare now for Salat al-Dhuhr, and I'll turn it back over to the MC, inshallah, for the schedule.
So we're gonna Zohar Salah is at 1:20. So until then, we'll get ready for Salah, and after Salah we'll have lunch, and then we'll start our session back up again.
You were gonna move this or?